You mentioned fasting now, eating less. The mechanism of fasting, how it works, where does that come from? Is it the restriction of the nutrients, or is it the discomfort of feeling hungry?
Well, it's not exactly clear. It might be a bit of both. That so mostly the good news is that when your body doesn't have spikes in blood sugar from eating and doesn't have a lot of amino acids around from eating a steak, it will go into a defensive mode. We know that. My lab published this in 2005 from a rat study that when you're hungry or calorically restricted, we used to call it a lot, the levels of longevity genes go up. We studied one called SIRT1, SART1. But now basically the concept is when you're not eating and your body is experiencing low glucose and has to make its own glucose, it will go into this defensive mode, and you want to maximize that. So I go for at least 18 hours a day without, or trying not to eat, and I compensate with tea and coffee. And the interesting thing is I don't feel hungry anymore, unless I'm super stressed, but that doesn't happen that often. Do you need to feel the hunger? I'm not sure. I would love to see definitive evidence of that, but it might be true because the brain does control aging as well.
That would be interesting, right? How much of the effect of the fast comes from the discomfort of sensing the fast, and how much of that is perhaps being curbed by the hot drinks, which you advocate as one of the ways to kind of get through a fast a little bit more easily. I guess it's going to be difficult. You would have to use some sort of calorie less stomach filling, like flumps or something to...
Well, so interestingly, in the 1930s, 35, Clive Mackay and his colleagues who studied caloric restriction actually were one of the first groups to report that if you feed rats instead of food, you give them cellulose with a little bit of food, which is the same bulk, they do live longer. So, that's why I lean towards the feeling of hunger not being as important as just maintaining your blood sugar levels at a steady low level.
That's interesting. So beyond fasting, optimal diet makeup for you is lean towards vegetables, colors, stressed vegetables, and stuff like that. If you eat just your one meal a day, what does that tend to look like? What's sort of typical David Sinclair dinner?
Well, there really isn't one. If I'm eating out, it's very different.
Roll the dice.
Yeah, I mean, I'll avoid fried food and a lot of meat. I just can't digest it. My bacteria in my gut don't care for it anymore. Those guys died out a while ago. So I cannot eat big heavy meals with meat unless I train myself, and I don't do that. So a typical meal, if I'm at home, I might have a little bit of cheese, some vegetables. I'll cook some up, or even eat them raw with a dip. Usually I'm working. If nobody's visiting, I'm actually just grazing while I work, and that's my dinner. I don't really at home focus on making meals. I'd rather just get other stuff done. But eating out, here's an important point. If somebody has a dessert, I won't typically order a dessert. I haven't since I was aged 40, and that's over a decade ago. But I will steal a spoonful of cheesecake.
Someone else's.
You gotta live. What's the point of living longer if it's not enjoyable? So that's the other point, which is you wouldn't want to go from a standing start to what I do, because you'll have habits that are really hard to break. Just putting stuff in your mouth and chewing is a habit. Ask anyone who's been a smoker about that. I think we as mammals, we like to suck on things and chew on things. So there's that to overcome, and that takes a couple of weeks at least to get used to. So go steadily and try skipping one meal if you've never tried it, either breakfast or dinner. Eat breakfast or eat dinner, but don't do both.
Someone should write a protocol for that. Like, just a really good blog post about how to, because I've seen many about how to do intermittent fasting, but very few about how to transition from a normal or a more typical eating state into a fasting state. Day 1 to 5, try this. Day 5 to 10, try this. That would be, someone do that. Someone can write that for us. Yeah, it's an interesting one that you've got a problem, or that there is a problem with eating lots of protein and regularly. Coming from a gym bro background, obviously that makes me want to be violently sick. if someone wants to try and maintain muscle mass or even increase their muscle mass, is it going to have to be a trade-off because there's a maximum amount of protein that you can absorb within one meal? Increasing the frequency that you eat that protein at is good for muscle synthesis, but bad for longevity. Is there any sort of insight you've got there?
Right. Well, if you want to be a bodybuilder, especially professionals, what I do is it may not be optimal, though. There's a fair number of athletes who say plant-based diets are equal or better. I'm not an expert on that, but what I can tell you is that, I've built up my muscle mass on a diet like I have. I don't know if anyone can tell, but I'm in better shape than I've ever been since, I'm back to my body that I was when I was 20. And so I don't find that my diet prevents me from gaining muscle mass or working out. I suppose if I wanted an extra 5% gain, I could do that. But for me, just being healthy, fit, feeling good, and lean is my goal. I'm not out to win contests.